President Bola Ahmed Tinubu on Monday afternoon signed into law the 2024 appropriation bill at the Presidential Villa, Abuja. The president signed the 28.7 trillion naira budget document earlier approved by the National Assembly, hours after he arrived in Abuja from Lagos, where he spent the past week holidaying. The budget is 1.2 trillion naira higher than the budget he proposed to a joint session of the National Assembly on November 29, 2023. Then the president had pegged the budget deficit for 2024 fiscal year at 9.18 trillion naira. Joining me right now to discuss this is Muktar Mohammed, CEO of Finance with Muktar. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
All right, let's just start off the conversation on this note. Now, the 2024 budget is about 1.2 trillion naira higher than the budget he proposed earlier to the joint session of the National Assembly on November 29, 2023. Now, on Friday, December 29th, that's 2023, the Senate actually did increase it by 1.2 trillion naira, moving the budget from the initial 27.5 trillion naira to 28.7 trillion naira. Now, let's talk about this particular increase, proposed or put in by the Senate. Is it actually justified?
Well, thank you for having me again. It's never justified when the Senate does anything. It's only justifiable to them. That's why they attempt to explain to you why they are doing it. But it's not new. They've never been a budget that has been sent to the National Assembly since the advent of democracy in 1999 that has come back the same way the executive sent it. It's even better now. People say it's even a little bit better. And before we used to see local government projects being put in for federal government to execute. So I didn't think Tinubu was not expecting them to increase the budget. I'm sure they must have had that conversation. But again, where the increment is coming from is something that we've all have, or we've talked about it before now, 100 million. I mean, some of them going to the legislators, and the only thing they keep telling us is that they are going to have to increase feeding for children in schools. So the budget has been all about the National Assembly. If you look at that budget, about 4 billion was earmarked for building of car park, 16 billion for hospital, National Assembly. So, and all these, and again, National Assembly justified that they've realized that there's going to be more revenue from the executive, but they are not looking at if there's those revenue shortfall, because already we are seeing that oil, they made an oil benchmark 1.76. OPEC has given them a quarter of 1.5 million barrels per day. So definitely there's already shortfall for about 200-something thousand barrels per day. So that will also affect the revenue. But again, I think it's all politics playing out here, and the president is also a politician. Maybe they will settle it behind the bank door, and that's why he's saying the supplementary budget should run concurrently with the current budget that he have signed into law.
All right. I mean, we'll get into some specifics in the budget, but the president actually pegged the budget deficit for the 2024 fiscal year at 9.18 trillion naira. He stated that the 9.18 trillion naira deficit is lower than the 13.78 trillion naira deficit recorded in 2023, which represents about 6.11% of the GDP. I'd like to know your reaction on this assertion by the president.
I think it's a good one. We've talked about the budget deficits for from a height of about 13 trillion to 9. I think that's a very good one. We've not seen that for a while. It's the first time we are beginning to see we operate a budget deficit. What we normally see, the previous year's deficit is always higher than the other year. So for the first time, we are seeing a reduction in that. I think we have to give the president kudos for that. Him and his team, what they've been able to achieve with that. And they've been able to achieve it without even thinking about the ways and the means. So definitely it's a good thing. So they are saying that they even think they will make the deficit will reduce as time goes on, because they believe that there are a lot of revenue leakage that they've been able to block. And so for me, I think one of the high points of this budget is surely the reduction in terms of the budget deficit.
All right. I'm still staying on the deficit aspect, where, of course, the president also stated that the deficit will be financed by new borrowings totaling about 7.8 83 trillion naira. That's about 298.49 billion naira from privatization proceeds, and also 1.05 trillion naira drawdown on multilateral and bilateral loans secured for specific development projects. Now, I want you to look at it from a fiscal angle. The fact that loans again are involved to finance a deficit. What is the implication of this?
Well, I don't think there's so much an implication on it. I think this borrowing is not as bad as what we normally encounter during the Buhari administration. I think the borrows are tied to specifics, and which make it a little bit easy, though we have yet to get full details about borrowing. Yeah, like I always say, borrowing itself is not a bad idea. Every government all over the world sometimes have to borrow to sort out to put in one effect or the other. It's actually when you are borrowing for a capital expenditure, and we are looking at this current borrowing, it seems to be going into capital expenditure, and that is good for everybody. So I am not a fan of saying I don't borrow or borrow, but again, I'm also not a fan of borrowing above board like what we saw before. You must borrow in relative to your revenue to see if you are able to pay. Because the challenge we have, we try to calculate revenue debt to GDP, forgetting that it's not GDP that we use to pay our debt, is the revenue that is going to come to government. So how is government going to improve its revenue and be able to pay the debt without suffering the next generation of Nigerians? For me, that's what I'm well concerned about.
I'm going
but
to
say that
the
government should not borrow, I don't think it's a problem.
I'm going to stay with you on the aspect of the borrowing, because I mean a good amount of Nigeria's, will I call it, revenue right now goes into servicing debt. And we keep talking about the economy, dragging and of course stalling. The question right now is this: you said you are not against borrowing, but I mean, for a very long time, you would agree that Nigeria has had quite a number of really bad debts. So shouldn't there be a line to borrowing at all, even as a nation?
There should be a line. I basically agree with you. And that's why we're upset with the former CBN governor for allowing the government to borrow above what they are supposed to borrow. That is one. But secondly, you see, like I said, the challenge I have with borrowing in Nigeria is you are borrowing if you are borrowing for pleasure. But if you are borrowing because you want to do capital expenditure, you must look at how variable that project is, how much is it going to add to the GDP, and how much revenue is going to add to the economy. And if you borrow that, that means the project itself could be able to generate the revenue to pay off its debt. That's, for me, that's what I see. It's just like a business. When your business begins to grow, you want to borrow more to expand your business, as long as the expansion they're going to do will be able to pay for the debt that you have collected. So for me, it's not actually a very big issue. The issue is that what are we borrowing? Are we borrowing for consumption, or are we borrowing for development? If we are borrowing for consumption, that is very bad. We're borrowing for development, it's a good thing. But at the end of the day, it's a snowball effect that even after you pay the debt, these things are there. Now, when you talk about asset, I think that's the best way to go now that we need to have so much warhorse in terms of FX to be able to make sure that the naira is being sustained, or they stop the downward trend of the naira. So any attempt to either by selling or by leasing, especially assets that are not economically valuable to us, or assets that we don't really use so much as a nation, I think is a welcome development. Instead of you going to borrow from World Bank, IMF, you are now looking at using some of your assets to pay off for this to sell off and then use it for development. For me, it's a good thing.
All right. I mean, let's also talk about the revenue generation aspect of it. Now, the administration has said, you know what, we will show up revenue generation, both internally, especially, and then you also look at the current business environment. How easy is it for many businesses in Nigeria to thrive? We've started a new year. Soon, businesses will start taking stock of their first quarter, second quarter, and all of that. And quite a number of times, many of these businesses complain of multiple taxation, right? So you look at it in terms of shoring up, in the words of the president, broadening the tax net, but then you also look at it vis-a-vis the ease of doing business currently in the country. I mean, we know of certain multinationals that recently left the country in the health and pharmaceutical field. So looking at it vis-a-vis the ease of doing business, and also the fact that the current administration wants to shore up internal revenue generation. How is that going to work?
Yeah, I think what I'm waiting for is a game changer. And I say that game changer has to be if you are telling me to widen the tax bracket. I'm looking for a game changer that will widen the tax bracket, but draw so much of the informal sector into the tax net. And this cannot be achieved overnight. Like you said, some SMEs are still battling. Some of them are folding up. So trying to bring them more to pay tax, especially those in the informal sector, is going to be difficult, but it's not impossible. Because what I tell people is that the life wire of the Nigerian economy is the informal sector. When I talk about the informal sector, I'm talking about the market woman, I'm talking about the driver, I'm talking about generally what we call the ordinary Nigerian. They are the largest employer of labor, and 90% of that sector do not pay taxes. So if you are thinking of widening the tax bracket, it's how about getting those other sector to pay. That is one. Then secondly, like you said, a lot of business have been suffering, but again, what benefit will the government bring to them? If you bring a good benefit, it won't be a problem for them to pay tax because they will see the benefit of what they are having from government. So the main reason why most people don't want to pay tax for SMEs is just because of they are not feeling the impact of government. I can't be using my light, my everything to develop my government, and then you want to come and collect tax. No idea why I pay tax for you to give me development. So if I'm not getting it, then I'll be shrewd in managing my taxation. So that for me is the basic problem that they are having. But like I said before now, this budget is very overambitious with the numbers they are pumping in and how they want to go about it. But all the same, it's a budget of renewed hope. It's a budget that will work with expectation. But if you tell me to talk about, I'm sitting down here talking about it, it will be very, very difficult to achieve even 70% of this budget.
Now, I would like to pick up your word. You said the budget is pretty much overambitious. Would you like to expand more on that? Why do you think it's overambitious?
Number one, I've talked about revenue, 27 trillion. How are you going to get that if you are not going to deal with the informal sector? Oil benchmark is already, you look at oil, you spend a benchmark 1.75, and now oil, OPEC are giving you 1.5. So that makes it very overambitious. When you look at inflation, bringing down inflation from a height of 30 to a low of 18. How do you do that? That's also a very, very, very curious tax. It's doing good, but with the structure we have around, it's not stabilizing exchange rates. We've not seen any action to show us that exchange rate will stable anytime soon. So most of all these things, when you look at it, look at what they said in the paper, look at reality on ground, look at their performance to achieve that, you sometimes will have to laugh. I'm sure that is why the president said he has an election unit to measure ministers, to make them work hard. So for me, I think they need to do more. They seem to do a lot of talking, talking the right word. Then those criminals, or what I call economic sabotage, either in FX or in other sectors of the Nigerian economy, will drop back and wait for the government to see if really they will be strong enough to implement the policy that they come to. And when they realize the government is not strong enough, they come back in, and before you know it, they swallow the government, especially in the FX market. So for me, I think we need to look at it holistically and address some of these major challenges that normally make the budget not to strive.
All right, now let's go back to some of the items on the budget. We know that items like security, of course, have a huge amount of votes when it comes to monies. Also, we know that education and health. But there are other items that people, as you know, raised eyebrow. For instance, the proposal to sort of a befitting residence for the vice president, and also the daily expenses in some of the, what I call it, overheads when it comes to living expense of the president, the presidency, and also the State House and what have you. I would like to know your reactions to some of the items and the allocations, you know, or the votes, the money votes when it comes to some of those items, and your reservations too.
I have a lot of reservations for those items, virtually all of those items. I have reservation for it. So it doesn't look like a government that is trying to go through a lot of challenge, that the government that have not been able to pay minimum wage, up to living wage up to this moment, government that is still battling in one area or the other. And what you see is that they are also allocating money for frivolous things. For me, I don't think that is something I desire. That's why, again, that budget looks It looks like it's a budget for reward, not a budget of renewal hope. It's a reward to your political clients for helping you become the president. That's what I see. But a lot of things are wrong in that budget. A lot of things are wrong in that budget
Okay,
because there's no thorough studies to make sure that these things that are wrong are going to be corrected. This government has come up with policies. This government have studied the right talk, but it has been difficult for them to turn their talk to action on real time.
All right, Muktar Mohammed, a CEO of Finance with Muktar, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.